Hi everyone. We are continuing learning about why Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is so important that we feel he should have a day off every year in honor of his birthday. And he is. He changed the United States for us, and he tried to make things much more fair. So this is our last book in the series, and then we'll end up watching a movie about him. But this is called A Picture Book of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of America's great leaders. He was a powerful speaker, and he spoke out against laws which kept Black people out of many schools and jobs. He led protests and marches demanding fair laws for all people. So think back to Rosa Parks, right? And it was a time when the rules weren't fair. Whites were treated differently than people of color. And so that's what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. tried to change. And by doing that, he did it using protests and marches, like when they did the boycott on the buses with Rosa Parks. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin's father was a pastor. His mother had been a teacher. Martin had an older sister, Willie Christine, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel. Young Martin liked to play baseball, football, and basketball. He liked to ride his bicycle and to sing. He often sang in his father's church. Martin is in the center, his brother, Alfred Daniel, and his sister, Willie Christine. Young Martin played in his backyard with his friends. One day, he was told that two of his friends would no longer play with him because they were white and he was Black. So I want you to see, this is where slavery ended and was outlawed, but things didn't mean they got really that much better. Slavery was gone, but people of color were really treated unfairly. And to not let kids play together because of their color, can you imagine? Martin cried. He didn't understand why the color of his skin should matter to anyone. Martin's mother told him that many years ago, Black people were brought in chains to America and sold as slaves. She told him that long before Martin was born, the slaves had been set free. However, there were still some people who did not treat Black people fairly. In Atlanta, where Martin lived, and elsewhere in the United States, there were white-only signs. Black people were not allowed in some parks, pools, hotels, restaurants, or even schools. Blacks were kept out of many jobs. Martin learned to read at home before he was old enough to start school. All through his childhood, he read books about Black leaders: Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, George Washington Carver. Martin was a good student. He finished high school 2 years early and was just 15 when he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. At college, Martin decided to become a minister. After Martin was graduated from Morehouse, he studied for a doctorate at Boston University. While he was there, he met Coretta Scott. She was studying music. They fell in love and married. In 1954, Martin Luther King Jr. began his first job as a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama. The next year, Rosa Parks, a Black woman, was arrested in Montgomery for sitting in the white-only section of a bus. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a protest. Blacks throughout the city refused to ride the buses. Dr. King said, "There comes a time when people get tired of being kicked about." One night, while Dr. King was at a meeting, someone threw a bomb into his house. Martin's followers were angry. They wanted to fight. Martin told them to go home peacefully. "We must love our white brothers," he said. "We must meet hate with love." This is a really strong message from him. That, can you imagine, your house is bombed and you're gonna go and treat those people with love And he felt that was the best way to get the message across, that we have to love each other. The bus protest lasted almost a year. When it ended, there were no more white-only sections on buses. Dr. King decided to move back to Atlanta in 1960. There, he continued to lead peaceful protests against white-only waiting rooms, lunch counters, and restrooms. He led many marches for freedom. In 1963, Dr. King led the biggest march of all, the March on Washington. More than 200,000 people, black and white, followed him. "I have a dream," he said in his speech. "I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Do you understand what he's saying here? He's saying, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. You should look at a person and see, what do they have inside themselves? Are they a good person? And that's how they should be judged. Are they judged for being a good person? We know you shouldn't just judge somebody because of the color of their skin. The next year, in 1964, Dr. King was awarded one of the greatest honors any man can win, the Nobel Peace Prize. The country was changing. New laws were passed. Blacks could go to the same schools as whites. They could go to the same stores, restaurants, and hotels. White-only signs were against the law. See what a difference he made? He changed. He changed the United States. Dr. King told his followers to protest peacefully, but there were some riots and some violence. Then, in April 1968, Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee. He planned to march so black and white garbage workers would get the same pay for the same work. On April 4th in Memphis, Dr. King stood outside his motel room. Another man, James Earl Ray, was hiding nearby. He pointed a rifle at Dr. King. He fired the gun. An hour later, Dr. King was dead. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of a world free of hate, prejudice, and violence. Carved on the stone which marks his grave are the words, "I'm free at last." So this is why I want you to understand why we celebrate his birthday. He was so important to our history. He tried to make things better for all Americans. And we still have a ways to go, right? But we can do this. And his biggest message is about doing it peacefully.